Welcome to Tell Me Your Story. New paradigms for a new world where we're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here 9 times a week. Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com. We are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, as well as YouTube, where you can watch these conversations. I hope that you will take time to subscribe and click notifications so that when a new conversation is posted, you'll be notified and you'll be able to tune in, listen in, and learn, and be entertained and inspired. A reminder that Choices, which is my book, 5 Steps for Life, it's available on Amazon.com in paperback, hardcover, and Kindle with Audible, soon to be released. We also ask that if you can support the work that we are doing financially, we do have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for an email address to whom you're sending, please go to richard@richarddugan.com. That's the email address. If you go to richarddugan.com, there is also a link directly to PayPal so that you can send us whatever support you can. And we thank you to those who have helped and to those who will help. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision, the 2020s, to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still, small voice. And with that, we now take you to our very special interview and guest here on Tell Me Your Story. And welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. I am Richard Dugan, and our very special guest is Randy Hughes. They call him Mr. What is that now? A Mr. Land Trust. And we're going to talk about a lot of different things, including the work that he does in that particular area. Welcome, Randy, to our program.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you for inviting me. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's a little outside the realms of what we normally talk about, but it does have an impact on us in our communities across the country. And probably, again, I don't know what all of the real estate laws and regulations around the world are, but certainly people are investing, if you will, buying and investing in properties everywhere, and some of them even live there. First of all, and I will start with the one question that we're going to get started with, but what is an investment property? And then go ahead and follow that up with, and why did you choose to get involved in that particular area of real estate?
Well, an investment property would be a piece of real estate that you don't live in, like your personal residence you live in. So it could be a single family house, an apartment building, could be a Kentucky Fried Chicken or a Walgreens lease. It could be air rights or mineral rights. All types of real estate that you can have as an investment.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly your own home traditionally has been an investment, but most people don't buy a house to live in as an investment or for reasons of investment, but to live there because they like it. They like the kitchen or they like the garage or whatever it is that attracts them to buy that house. And it turns out to be sometimes, in many cases, accidentally the best investment they'll ever make in their lifetime. It's kind of like I have a friend that I went from kindergarten through college with, and we both grew up in Illinois. And 30 years ago, he moved to Charleston, South Carolina, and he ended up buying a house to live in and 2 rental properties. Didn't want to be a big landlord or anything, but just ran into those opportunities. And he paid a little over $100,000 for each of those houses 30 years ago. And I have since deemed him the accidental millionaire. That's what I call him, because each one of those houses now are worth more than $1 million. So
Wow.
he became a millionaire by accident, just by buying a couple of houses plus his personal residence. So that's primarily what I do. I have invested in all kinds of investments from commercial buildings to apartment buildings, catfish restaurants, all kinds of investments. But I keep coming back to the single family house as the ideal investment, at least it has been for me.
Mhm. So why did you choose this in particular? I mean, and how long ago did you get started in real estate in general?
Well, I bought my first house, Richard, in 1969 when I was in college. Um, and I majored in business, and I wanted to. My thought was I wanted to learn how to buy apartment buildings. Um, and I was the first kid in my family to graduate from college. I had no seed money. My parents got divorced. My father was an alcoholic, and he left home when I was 16 years old. Got in a car one day and drove away and never came back. So he wasn't much help to get me started.
Hmm.
Um, and so I quickly learned that to buy an apartment building, you need money, and of course you need money to buy a house too. But it was a lot less money to buy a house than it was an apartment building. So by default, I ended up buying um, a house that was catty cornered back behind my mother's house, and I lived at home for 2 years of college while I rented out that house to other college students to generate cash flow. And I took that profit, and by the time I graduated from college, I had three single family houses, and that kind of got me going um, at the start. So kind of by default, I ended up with houses because it was easier to buy them than it was apartment buildings.
Hmm. I've heard it said, and we'll kind of go down some of these things, but I have actually heard these different. I'll call them infomercials, where there are people who actually say you don't need any money to buy a house. You can do it, and then they talk about this way and that way and the other way, and I sit there thinking about that, going, well, wait a minute. Unless you're using someone else's money, you need money to buy a property. I don't care whether it's residential or commercial or industrial or whatever it is. You've got to have something to put down on that property, and then you got to make the mortgage payments. Is was I is that a story of mythology in real estate that we I was listening to as that commercial?
No, it is possible. Um, in fact, my mentor, a guy named Jack Miller, who died 15 years ago now, who lived down in Tampa, Florida, he was the first guy who taught a seminar on how to buy houses and rent them out. Um, you see, houses did not used to go up in value until financing changed. And what I mean by that was back in the 30s, 1930s, um, they came out with Freddie Mac and the governmental backed loans, um, which made it a little bit easier to get financing, but they still, for quite a while, only offered 5-year amortizations on houses. And because of that, the value of houses didn't really rise much. You're amortizing the entire purchase of the house over 5 years, which gave you pretty high payments. And then when the federal government started backing loans that were 30-year fixed rate loans, that brought down the monthly payment considerably, which allowed the value of houses to rise. And that's exactly what they've been doing in general for the last 50, 60 years. So that then people started saying, well, wait a minute, maybe I should buy and rent these things out as an investment, not just a place to live. And so my mentor, really smart guy, he started teaching classes on this. And in fact, a guy named Robert Allen, which you and your listeners may have heard of, was one of his students. And Robert Allen took all that information and wrote a book called Nothing Down. And it was a bestseller. And Robert Allen became famous from that book. nothing down, meaning buying real estate with no money down. Now, it is kind of a misnomer. And in my opinion, I think you can buy property with nothing down if you have good credit and if you have a cooperating seller. Um,
Hmm.
and it's a little bit difficult to describe over a radio program, but basically, if you agree to sell me your apartment building for $1 million, let's say, Richard, and I say, okay, well, I'm going to go get 80% of the purchase price, or $800,000 from the bank, because I have good credit.
Mm-hmm.
But Richard, I'm not going to give you the other 200,000 for a while. We're going to defer that to sometime in the future.
Okay.
Now I got a nothing down deal, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's kind of a framework of there are many ways of structuring it, but that's kind of a basic framework of how you can get into property with nothing down. But again, you need a good relationship with your banker. You need to pay your bills on time and have a good credit score before the powers that be will allow you to do that. So it behooves you to pay your bills and develop a relationship with the bank, because the banks can make you or break you.
That is true. Mr. Land Trust. Mr. Land Trust is the gentleman we're talking with, and Mr. Land Trust madesimple.com is a website you might want to check out. It's got a lot of things going on that website. We hope that you will do so as we continue talking with Randy Hughes on Tell Me Your Story. Yes,
Richard.
yes, go
Yeah,
ahead.
let me correct that. My website is actually Land Trust with an S, landtrustmadesimple.com.
Landtrustmadesimple.com. That's the website I want to go have you go to, and we'll talk more with Randy Thomas here on Tell Me Your Story. Randy, I want to ask you, first of all, who dubbed you Mr. Land Trust?
Great question, Richard. It was by accident. I speak all over the country and outside of the country about the benefits of using a trust to hold title to real estate investments. And I was scheduled to speak to a group down in Florida. This was several years ago. And they started advertising me on their website as their next speaker, Mr. Land Trust. And when I saw that, I thought, what a great idea. I need to take that name. And so I copyrighted it and registered it and all that stuff, because it's become a great handle for me. But it was by accident, totally.
Yeah, I have the same feeling. I go by I am technically a reverend, but the doctor part was given to me by one of our programmers here about 15, 17 years ago, and it just kind of stuck. But it actually worked because I do what's called archival work. I have a turntable that'll play 33, 70, 45, and 78s, so I can transfer your albums to digital. I have a reel to reel that I can transfer your reel to reels to digital. I have a cassette player that transfers from cassette to digital. And I've actually had some interesting experiences in that regard. I'm sure you have as well since 1969, how the landscape has changed. And I know that the real estate rules change from state to state. There are 50 or 51 or 52. There aren't 52 states. I'm talking about our territories like Puerto Rico and so forth. So the rules are different in every single state. I'm wondering, in 1934, you mentioned 34, when they made a little adjustment so that people could start to afford houses, but also that started the price of the house, if you will, or the value to start to go up. That was really the main impetus for doing that, to help us to get out of the depression, was it not?
I think it was that, and as then as men started coming back from World War II, they started producing babies, and families grew, and housing. There was a tremendous need for housing, and it was one way uh, to allow builders to afford to build and homeowners afford to buy. So all those factors came in together to play in a big way right after World War II.
I had an experience when I bought my first house at the age, how old was I? I was in my 30s. My first wife and I were good friends with a realtor in Phoenix, and this was back in 1993. And there was this house on the west side, or at least that's what it was, the west side back then. I don't know what it is now because it's so built up out there. And it was a brick house, 3 bedroom, 1 3/4 bath with a pretty good sized backyard. Front yard was very nice as well, had a 2 car carport, carport. And then it had a basketball pole out in front, and so forth and so on. And back then, this was probably 12 to 1,300 square feet, give or take, for $43,000. I asked a friend of mine who does comps and so forth. So what is that property worth it today? Around $250,000. Now that doesn't seem like a huge jump like a lot of other places, but then again, that part of the valley may not have, high end homes or even medium homes, that kind of thing. But what I do remember, Randy, is this: we saw the home on September 1st of '93. I then went off on a weekend, Labor Day weekend, with some buddies of mine up north to a lake up in northern Arizona. Came back and we began the process with our realtor. One of the things that we did, of course, was we decided we weren't going to get bogged down in the details. Now, that didn't mean we didn't care about the details. It was if there was a problem with the appraiser or the lender or the insurance or whatever it was, we weren't going to focus our attention and get worried and all stressed out. We had this mantra, and this mantra was, we're buying a house. That's what we're doing. We're dealing with the realtor, but we're buying a house. We're dealing with the insurance company, but we're buying a house. That's our focus. We closed in 30 days on the 30th of September, which even back then was unheard of. But then we hit 2007, 2008. I mean, you were around, you knew what happened. And it was one of the things that really bothered me about it wasn't what happened in terms of people losing their homes and thousands of homes in foreclosure. It was the bailouts. I mean, wait a minute. Capitalism is that if you make the right decisions, you survive. If you make the wrong decisions, you're done. You're out. And I'm sitting here thinking, I would have liked to have seen what would have happened if they hadn't bailed out the two. There were two companies, like off the top of my Lehman Brothers, or maybe I don't remember. What are your thoughts in regards to the current state of real estate and those values? Do you think that things are overly inflated? Because I don't know that there's anywhere in California that my wife and I would ever find a house, probably a shack with maybe only 3 walls for $43,000. But
No.
what are your thoughts in general? And maybe it's from state to state, but your thoughts in general about the world of real estate as far as the consumer is concerned. Is it as bad as some people say, or is it a great time?
Well, there are all markets are local, um, and I have a difficult time in my small city where I live. It's just a couple 100,000 people, understanding the markets from the north end of north end of town to the south end of town, let alone nationally. But there are certainly areas that are growing substantially, and therefore price increases are continuing. Number one, as a country, we have a housing deficit. In other words, there are more people looking for housing than can find housing. And to a certain degree, in some areas like California, we shoot ourselves in the foot with so much regulation that builders don't build. It's too darn difficult.
Yeah.
So The other thing I find interesting is in being a landlord for the last 54 years, probably 50 of those years, I had 80% of my tenants renew their lease every year and 20% move.
Okay.
Since COVID, it's more like 95% of my tenants renew and 5% move. Um, the rental market in our area and in many areas in the country is really, really tight. I get calls almost every day from people saying, do you have a place? Do you have a house? I need a house to rent. And I say, no, we're all rented up and won't have anything maybe until summer, assuming somebody decides to move out.
Yeah.
But uh, it makes me, it reminds me of conversations I had with my mentor, where he told me 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago now, where he said that he predicted that our country would become like Europe in that 10% of the population owns all the real estate and 90% of the population rents. In fact, I write a bi-monthly newsletter for my students, and the last edition that came out March 1st, the title of it was, "Are we becoming a nation of renters?" Because so many people can't afford to buy. They don't have high enough credit score, or they're self-employed less than 2 years, or the income to debt ratio is off balance, or they don't have a social security number. There are lots of reasons why you will not qualify for a conventional loan ever. And that means you got to rent or live on the street. So the rental market has changed dramatically in just the last 4 years compared to the previous 50 years, in my experience. The other thing driving this are demographics. For example, I was watching a news program the other day, and they were interviewing a lady down in Florida who had had her home wiped out by the latest storm down there last fall. And she said, I moved down here to Florida 8 years ago from Illinois, and I'm moving back. She said, sunshine just ain't worth it to have your house destroyed. And it seems like it's happening every 2 or 3 years now in Florida. And then I know your primary audience, Richard, is Santa Barbara area and California. Since the late 1800s, when they started keeping records of population growth, California has had an increase in population every single year until 3 years ago. And 3 years ago, the net population was decreasing.
Mm-hmm.
And when I talk to my students in California and all over the country, people are moving out of California and they're moving to Texas, Florida, and Tennessee. And what that does is that drives demand in those areas, and those areas are booming for a lot of reasons. Tennessee, for example, the gasoline prices are $1 cheaper than they are here in Illinois, where I live. They have no concealed carry laws. They have no state income tax. Now, California has over a 9% tax, I believe, just state income tax.
Mm-hmm.
Compare that to zero tax in Tennessee, and you can see why people are moving there. Tennessee is just booming. And then you throw on top of what I've just discussed the issue of climate change.
Mm-hmm.
State Farm bailed out of California last year.
Yep.
Said we're just not going to do this anymore because we're losing too much money. So as those factors come into play, you begin to wonder if only the very wealthy will be able to own a house on the beach, and they'll self-insure, because if you're going to borrow money from the government for your home loan, they require you to have insurance. And if you can't afford insurance or you can't buy insurance anywhere, then you're not going to live on the beach anymore
Right.
unless you're filthy stinking rich and can self-insure on a $5 or $10 million house, and not many people qualify for that. So
Well,
all those are factors.
yeah. I will tell you that when I moved here from Phoenix in 2006, and they were talking about this whole issue of regulations, and I began to see and hear the news in the state about the different things that were happening because of this regulation and that, I came up with this analogy. You're standing in the middle of a chessboard on either a black or a white square. You choose. And here are the rules. You can't move forward. You can't move back. You can't move to the left, and you can't move to the right. And you can't move diagonally. And here's the kicker. And you can't stay there. That is how, I guess the right word is, repressive the regulations are. However, I also then follow that up with, do you know the reason why regulations were in place in the first place? And I'm talking about the first regulations back whenever it started. I don't know if it was the 1800s or even before that, or not until the 1900s. It was because corporate companies refused to do the right thing by their employees. The first regulations had to do with child labor and so forth. So regulations are a necessary part of our existence, if you will, as a civilized society. However, you and I would definitely agree, in California specifically, they've run amok. There's no question they've run amok. It's really interesting. We've talked an awful lot here about some of the downsides to even attempting to own, if you choose to do so, your own home or a piece of property, whether it's to live in or as an investment. But as we continue here with Mr. Land Trust, we're going to talk about some of the positive things, some of the ways in which you can. We'll talk a little bit about that as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, along with Mr. Land Trust, and it's Randy Hughes, and we're talking about real estate. We're certainly talking about investment properties, and Mr. Land Trust is his moniker, if you will. Randy, how about the aspect of some of the positives? And you've obviously stated it very clearly that all real estate, kind of like politics, it's all local. But there are some general rules that do tend to float from state to state in that respect. If for someone who does genuinely want to have a place to call their own, they don't have to answer to anybody else, i.e., they don't have a landlord, they're not renting. Are there some things that are in place that can help a person to maybe put no money down in order to get into a house, and so on and so forth? Let's stay out of California, maybe the other 49 states, including Alaska. But what is your observation in that regard? Are there some positives?
Well, there are a lot of positives. There really, to my knowledge, there are not a whole lot of restrictions in any of the states against seller financing. And that's certainly a great way to buy real estate. Either the seller finances the whole deal for you, or a partial deal, like I described earlier with you,
Mm-hmm.
where they finance maybe your 20% down payment. But there are a lot of positives. It's just whether or not it fits your personality. And I always tell young people getting into the business, you'll find there's so many ways of making money in real estate. Find a way that fits your personality. And what I mean by that is, for example, I used to own apartment buildings on the University of Illinois campus back in the late 80s and early 90s. And after a few years, I realized that student apartment buildings is just not for me. Now, I know many people that have made fortunes in student housing, not only here in the University of Illinois, but all around the country. But doggone it, they have worked hard for it, and they've earned it. And what I mean by that is, with student rentals, for example, you have 100% turnover every year.
Yeah.
And they just, they'll break the windows out just for the fun of it while they're leaving because it's mom and dad's damage deposit. They don't care if they get it back. So it's management intensive, um, maintenance intensive, and just more work than I wanted to do in my lifetime. And so that was another reason why I stuck with the single family house, because I can rent it to a family, where hopefully dad's got some tools and some knowledge and he can fix some of the minor stuff and not complain about every little ant that crawls across the floor. Um, and 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 I don't have 100% turnover. As I mentioned, now it's like 95% stay and only 5% turnover, which makes my life a lot easier. So find what meets your fits your personality. It may be leasing to Walmart's, for example, Walmart, uh, or Walgreens, for example. Uh, Walgreens doesn't own any of their buildings; they lease everything, and that's because they don't want to be in the real estate business. They want their money working in their business, not spent owning real estate. So
Mm.
there are lots and lots of different ways of getting involved in real estate. Find what fits your personality, and then go after it and stick to it, and don't get spread out too far. Because as I speak to real estate clubs all around the country, there are a whole lot of people that come to these meetings, these real estate meetings, and they listen to all these great ideas. And I don't know if it's the paralysis of analysis or what it is, but many of them just never get anywhere. They either can't get started or can't stay motivated. Um, and it's not easy. Most businesses, in my experience, are not easy. It's a lot of hard work, and some
Yeah.
people just don't want to do that. But I always tell people, and if you don't want to do hard work, then don't complain when you get to my age and you got nothing.
Yeah.
And tell me I was lucky, because it wasn't luck. It was a lot of hard work.
I have to wonder if some people who choose to buy rental properties, whether they be multiple dwelling situations or a single family, they think, I'll go ahead and buy this rental property and I'll rent it to this person. And then I'll just sit back and collect the rent and pay the mortgage and so forth. And that'll be it. And you've just described how that isn't going to happen. Another
No.
change, too, is I remember in 93 when my first wife and I bought our first house, my hand was very sore after signing all of those papers, and there was a heck of a stack of papers. Now, here in the 21st century, in 2025, it's all DocuSign, and you just click, 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 and your signature just gets popped on there. And of course, if you're doing it, you've authorized that that's your signature and that you agree, and blah 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 blah. And so
Right.
it's gotten a little easier. Um, One of the other aspects too that I wanted to talk about, investment properties, one thing. Um, but I'm sure you've seen this. I don't know if they're still on or if they're still doing this. I'm sure they are. The flippers. I'm going to tell you that I can't stand flippers because they do to the value of the house what an owner would do, and they've just basically priced that potential owner out of that house. House was 100,000. They flip it, and then they have put it on the market. Now it's 200,000. The person who was going to buy it for 100,000 can't afford it now, and now they're renting. And that's, to me, that is the downside of flipping. I think a lot of these folks do a great job. I mean, the places look incredible when they're done. But what are your thoughts in that regard? Do you think that I mean, obviously it's illegal because people are doing it. But what about on a, I'm not even sure if I want to go as strong as to say ethical level.
Well, flipping is there are two ways to flip, in my opinion. One is I find a killer deal and negotiate a great price for $200,000, and then I go out to the marketplace and I advertise it or whatever. I find a buyer for 250,000,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't do anything to the property. I just make $50,000 because I'm a great negotiator of buying, let's say. That does happen, not that much, and not certainly not a lot of profit, but it does happen from time to time.
Hmm.
Most flippers are adding value. So, they buy a $200,000 house and maybe put 100,000 into it. Now they got 300,000 into the house, and maybe they sell it for 350 or 400 and make a profit. I think they deserve that because they're taking risk. They're investing their own money. And if they do it at the wrong time, like 2007 and 2008, they can go under. And so, timing is everything when it comes to that flipping thing.
Absolutely.
Uh, and there's a lot of risk. Your roofer falls off the roof, and you hired him as an independent contractor, but somewhere between the roof line and the ground, as he's falling, he becomes an employee and sues you as such. So there are lots of risks involved in flipping and rehabbing and all that. Um, but in my opinion, that's just a job, just like
Hmm.
any other job. And
Well,
if you want a job, that's fine. But if you want to invest for long-term wealth, uh, you don't just flip houses. You need to buy them and hold on to them and have your tenants pay your mortgage off. It's a long term gain, in my opinion. It's a turtle's approach to wealth as opposed to a rabbit.
right, right, exactly. Now, I want to do a comparison here, but before I do, I want to remind you folks that we're talking with Randy Hughes. He is the Mr. Land Trust, and we are going to continue our conversation with him here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, and we're talking with Randy Hughes, Mr. Land Trust, and I wanted to ask you about something in regards to this whole aspect of investment properties. Now, I could take, please let me have 100,000. Thank you. I could take $100,000 and I could put it in the bank into a CD or to this or that or other secure. I'm not going to lose my initial investment, but I can only gain um, through the financial institution's use of that 100,000 for loans and so forth. Or I could try the stock market, very risky. There's no question about that. Or I could put that into the purchase of a house, hold on to that house, again, maybe make it a rental and so forth. Help us out to understand the comparison between $100,000 cash into the bank or some financial institution for a secure investment as opposed to a real estate investment property. Say I put that 100,000 in.
Yeah. Well, it has to do with risk, Richard. Whether it's stocks, bonds, real estate, CDs. Obviously, cash in the bank is probably the most secure, and CDs, but the least return on your investment.
Right.
So you got to find what's comfortable for your investment level, so you can sleep at night.
Right.
And if you feel like buying a piece of real estate is too risky and you're not going to sleep at night, then I would say don't buy it.
Yeah.
Um, the other key thing here is when it comes to real estate is management. I don't care how good of a deal you get on a piece of real estate. If you can't manage it or know a good property manager, which they're very hard to find, then you're probably going to lose money.
Yeah.
Because a tenant can do $20,000 worth of damage to your property in a month. Um, and I've seen it happen. So you find your risk level, and then you work with that. Obviously, the older you are, the less risk averse you're probably going to be. The younger you are, you got time on your hands. It's like my attitude when I was 19 and started buying houses was, yeah, if I do something wrong here and I lose everything, then I'm back to where I was to begin with. So big deal.
Right.
Broke is broke. I've been there. I know how that feels. So, but I don't have much to lose and everything to gain. Um, So I always try to educate the younger folks on the fact that they have time on their side to not only benefit from, but to make up on errors. And what I
Mm.
mean by that is if you're 20 years old and you buy a single family rental house and you finance it over 25 years. So, and you, let's say you manage it yourself, it's just one house. When you're 45, that house is going to be paid for.
Mm.
And even if it doesn't go up in value at all, and history tells us it probably will go up in value. But bottom line is you've got a free and clear house. And in one day, you're going to go from having $1,000 a month house payments, for example, to zero.
Mm-hmm.
And your cash flow is going to go from maybe $200 a month positive cash flow to $1,200 in 1 month. Now that's one house from age 20 to 25 to 45. What if you bought 10 houses at age 20? And let's say they averaged $300,000. That's 10 houses, $3 million worth of houses.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say they don't go up in value at all in 25 years. But 25 years from now, you got $3 million worth of free and clear houses because you just kept your nose to the grindstone and
Right.
kept them rented, made your mortgage payments, did some maintenance, and you kept up with it. You could start all over at 45 and buy 10 more houses. You know, sell the first 10 for 3 million and start living the life, and buy another 10 houses and do it again.
Yeah.
And at 25 years from then, you're going to be what, 60, 70 years old?
Yeah.
Um, and I used to think 70 years old was really old until I turned 73 that last year. And now I wish I was 70 years old.
I kind of know the feeling. I'll be 65 this year, and I'm sick and tired of getting all of this stuff on Medicare. Here, join us, join us, join us. Go away. Well, folks,
Yeah.
go away. I've got an interesting question to ask our guest having to do with heat. Yes, heat, as we continue here on Tell Me Your Story. I'm Richard Dugan, your host, and we're talking with Randy Hughes. He is Mr. Land Trust. And Randy, this is a little aside from the whole aspect of investment, property investment. I've taken on the philosophy after owning two houses in Phoenix. The first one with my first wife, and then I lost that house in the divorce. And then my second wife, I was able to buy her house a couple of times. Actually, bought it, then refinanced it under an interest-only loan. That after 5 years, of course, boom, the mortgage payments go up. Ironically, we left town before that happened. We moved here to Santa Barbara in 2006, so we avoided that big old balloon. And then we have been renting in the same place since we moved here. We have not moved. We're one of those people, the 90 percenters, that you were talking about before.
Yeah, yeah.
I will tell you that our rent since we moved here has only gone up. Are you sitting down, Randy? It's
I am.
only gone up $2,000 in 19 years. Only. I don't know any place else, even in Santa Barbara, where anybody can say that.
Yeah, you're getting a killer deal there.
Yeah.
I'd keep that, Richard.
And we've considered the possibility of trying to figure out how we would come up with a couple $1 million to buy the property. It's 9 acres, but it's in the wilderness of the Los Padres National Forest. And the thought occurred to me, this is where the heat comes in, ladies and gentlemen. One of the reasons why we aren't in Phoenix anymore is because of the heat. We've been here 19 years. We've dealt with a lot of heat in Santa Barbara over those 19 years, probably 16 or 17 different wildfires. And the thought of buying a piece of property, even that one where we live now, trying to figure out how to negotiate that one. Okay, so let's say we did find a way to buy it. We're still in the potential heat. We're still in the firing line, or fire line, if you will. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm not sure it's worth it. I'm not sure it's worth that kind of stress. in terms of dealing with that potential, because we've seen it already at least 16 times. So the theory I've come to from or the philosophy, you pay whether you own or rent, wherever you live. And I'll say it this way too, even the homeless pay because they're living out in the weather. And there's a cost there because it could very well shorten their lives and so forth. But no
Right.
matter where you live, no matter what dwelling you live in, you pay, whether you rent or whether you own. So from my standpoint, people would say, well, man, you're throwing that money away every month. You got nothing to show for it. I'm going, I've got a place to live. I've got a bed to sleep in. I've got a roof over my head. I've got a yard that I enjoy taking care of, and so on and so forth. So I guess it's just a matter of a matter of perspective when it comes to whether you buy or whether you rent. And if I choose to continue renting, then guess what? The price of the housing, that doesn't bother me in the least, because I'm not affected by it. Because fortunately here in California, they can only raise the rent. I think it's 5%. I don't think they can raise it much more than that at any given time. But we've been very blessed with the landlords that we've had. And I don't know about you in Illinois, but they tried passing rent control a number of times here. I voted no because my heart, though I would love to have a lower rent, went to the landlords because they have, number one, they've been good to us over the years, especially when it came to the rent that we pay. And if they instituted rent control here in California, what's going to happen to them? Then how are they going to be able to pay if there is still a mortgage? Because this property is like 40 or 50 years old, and the family has owned it for that long. And who knows? Maybe they've refinanced it. I don't know. I have no idea. But I just thought that's not fair to do the landlords, because what's going to end up happening is we could be out. If they can't afford it, they stop making the payments. It goes into foreclosure, and then we get evicted because, so these are interesting times in which we live as far as real estate, and I wonder how many people they even think about that when it comes to the place that, let's just say, they rent, because the home that they own, well, for the time being, is owned by the bank and so forth. What are your thoughts in that regard? Do you find, because as you said, it used to be the percentage was split a little bit better, but now it's 90% who renew every year as opposed to a much lower amount. Do you think that they realize that? Not just that they can't afford, but hey, I'm going to pay whether I have a mortgage or have a rent to pay. So I'm going to stay here because the cost of moving, I don't have it.
Well, I think it's a good analogy that you've given with your own personal situation there, Richard, because it makes me think of this. You're getting a tremendous value. It's like if I went to a car dealership and they said, "We'll sell you this Cadillac for the price of a Chevy." Well, why would I not do that? I mean, that's a pretty good deal. I'm getting value there
Mm.
that I wouldn't get normally. Not everybody can have a deal like what you've got. So I say more power to you. Keep that deal as long as you can.
Yeah.
Uh, Not only because you're getting much more value than what you're paying for, but you have no risk. If a fire comes through and destroys that property, you got to find another place to rent, but you don't have to worry about losing the property.
Right.
And I think that's part of what has put our country in the market that we're in right now, which is high demand for rental properties.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the reason is that 3 and 4 years ago, especially during COVID, interest rates were really low, down to even 1.5% for a 30-year fixed rate loan. I think a lot of landlords, property owners that were renting their property out, sold for cash to not investors, but to homeowners. And so all those rental properties that sold for cash to homeowners were taken off the market. And now we have not enough rental properties to meet the demands of all those tenants out there.
Mm.
And there are a tremendous number of Americans that will never qualify for a conventional loan, as I mentioned before, for a number of reasons. So that forces them into the rental market, which drives up demand for rental and drives up rents. And we've seen rent increases. I've seen rent increases in the last 3 to 4 years that have been uh, so much more, like 50 to 100% more than the increases of the previous 50 years. In
Hmm.
other words, every year rents go up a little bit. Let's say they went up 2% a year for the last 50 years, and now they're going up 10 and 20% a year
Yeah.
all of a sudden. Um, so the other thing that I want to point out before we run out of time, Richard, is if you're going to buy investment property, you're either going to have to learn how to manage it yourself or find a good property manager, a good, honest property manager, somebody that's not going to take a $1,000 rental payment in cash and stick it in their pocket and tell you the house is vacant for the month.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful there. But more so, you have to be careful to not have the public know that you own or control that property. And that's where trusts come in. I could, if we had 3 more hours, I could tell you a bunch of stories, but I'll tell you one story to kind of make my point. I had a lady call me a couple of years ago from Florida, and she said, "How do I get your home study course? I want to learn how to put my properties into a land trust." And I said, "Okay, well, you can buy it on my website." But I said, "What made you come to this conclusion?" She said, "Well, I live down here in Florida. I own 8 rental houses, plus my own personal residence, and they're all titled in my name. And I just got a call from one of my tenants who said a man knocked on the door asking about me if I lived there. And she said, I have a feeling I know who he is, and I'm not interested." And now the light bulb went off in her head that day. You don't own this stuff in your name, especially you ladies out there. I mean, it's so easy. For example, I'm standing at the grocery store waiting to pay my bill, and the lady next to me is paying her bill. I look over her shoulder, I see the name on her credit card. I go back to my computer, I type in her name, and if she owns real estate in her name, up pops her address. Now I go over there and hassle her.
Hmm.
This is modern day stalking. So when you own rental real estate, the general public's concept is that you're rich. You may be having a really rough time and losing money on that property, but the general public thinks anybody who owns real estate is filthy rich and therefore subject to all kinds of crazy behavior,
Mm.
frivolous lawsuits, knocking on your door. I mean, I raised 2 little girls in my house. For 20 years, I had 2 girls in my house I was raising. And the last thing I needed was some guy who I was evicting to come knocking at my door and my 7-year-old daughter answer. So there's some real life threatening issues in owning rental real estate. And one of the best ways to avoid that is to not own it in your name so the public doesn't have your name attached to that property. And the way you do that is you have a trust own it, and then you own the trust. And there's no registry for trust. You can't look up who owns the trust. So it gives you total privacy of ownership.
Mm. Wow. And I've seen a lot of stories lately of homes that have been, in essence, stolen from the legitimate owner because somebody goes to the, I don't know if it's the title office, wherever it is that they go, and they are able to change out the title or the deed or whatever documents that there are, and now the legitimate homeowner doesn't own the home because this person has fraudulently gone through this process of transferring to their name this property without
Right.
without actually buying the home. It's really sad. And this kind of stuff's been going on. Quite honestly, man's inhumanity to man has been going on as long as man has been on the planet. So, it's just a better safe than sorry in that regard. We don't have a whole lot much more time here, Randy, but I'm fascinated by this subject because, I mean, number one, I've been fortunate. My wife and I, present wife and I, have been very fortunate. Would I like to have that brick home back in Phoenix? Maybe as an investment property, but I don't think I'd ever want to live there. Not so, just because I left because I couldn't stand the heat. I mean, I'd been there 46 years, which was 45 summers too many. Uh, but I visit. My mother and three sisters live there. My brother, half the year, lives there. And I don't mind going back there to visit. But to own a property there and live there, I couldn't do it. And again, it goes back to again what we talked about and what you talked about earlier, especially when it comes to renting or owning. You have to do it that you're comfortable with. God, you want to be able to sleep at night. Good heavens! And it's really it. On the one hand, it's really complicated. It's like, okay, I have the cash. Give me the receipt. Now the house is mine. And not exactly. It doesn't quite work that way. It would be nice, like when you were in the grocery store and you're buying a candy bar or a loaf of bread, and you pay the cash and you get the receipt and you walk out the door. I wish it was that simple, but nonetheless, if you let the experts take care of it, such as yourself, and do what you're suggesting, and that is to put your home in a trust so that it is not visible to the general public. That's a smart thing to do. As a matter of fact, when I got married back on 30th of June last year, turns out I found out that there are two different kinds of marriage licenses in California. One is public, and one is confidential. I didn't know that existed. It was very interesting. Um,
Yeah.
this is fascinating. Randy, I can't thank you enough for giving us this time. And I'm going to encourage people to take the time to go to your website and to check out the information as we've shared here on the program. Again, that website is Land Trusts, that's plural, landtrustsmadesimple.com, landtrustsmadesimple.com. Randy, once again, thank you so much for being a part of the work we're doing here on Tell Me Your Story.
Thank you, Richard. Appreciate the opportunity.
I
I
have
hope your people go to the website because there's a lot of free information there that'll explain to them and answer all their questions.
free is always good. I do have
Free is good.
I have three final questions that I ask all of my guests. But before I do, I want to thank you for listening to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, where we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We are here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and we're here Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m., streaming live at all those times at richarddugan.com with podcasts on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. We're on YouTube where you can watch these conversations, and we hope that you'll subscribe and click notification. We also remind you that Choices, 5 Steps for Life, my book, is available on Amazon in hardcover, paperback, and Kindle, with Audible soon to be released. And we also ask that if you can support the work we're doing financially, we would be gratefully appreciative. We have a PayPal account that's there for your security as well as ours. And there are 2 links on the homepage of richarddugan.com, one to Amazon for the book, 2, the link to PayPal for any kind of a tip you'd like to leave us. And finally, we encourage you to take some time during this decade of perfect vision to go within to that quiet, peaceful, calm, still place and listen to that still small voice. And with all of that, we go to our final 3 questions for our guest. And the first question is, who is Randy Hughes?
Randy Hughes is a father, a grandfather, and a teacher who enjoys teaching very much, a traveler who travels all over speaking and teaching and enjoying people. And lastly, he is a full-time real estate investor.
What gets you up in the morning?
That's a great question. I love to come to the office when I'm in town. I travel probably 2 weeks out of the month, so the other 2 weeks when I'm in town, I come to the office in the morning. I work out from 7 to 8 a.m. Every morning, 6 days a week anyway, and then go to the office. And I love interacting with the people in the office, my tenants, making decisions. having a reason to get up in the morning. I raised two girls. I was married for 41 years, and my wife died 10 years ago, and so it's just me now. But it allows me to, of course, have the freedom to travel and explore the world while I'm enjoying teaching and talking to people.
And finally, what was your best day?
Oh man, that's a great question too. My best day, my best day. Um, Probably the best day of my life was when I married my wife. We met in college,
Hmm.
and we graduated on a Sunday in 1973 and got married the following Friday. Um, so there wasn't much downtime in between. Um, and we had a great life. We lived together for 7 years before we started to have children. So we traveled and had a lot of fun and got to know each other before we had the stress of children in our lives. And then, like I said, we were together for 41 years. So
Hmm.
not many people can attest to that kind of longevity. And so I'm thankful that I had that relationship in my life.
Wonderful. Once again, Randy, thank you so much for joining us. And I thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to long. Jeanette, I am still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Smokey, I will see you on the other side. Mike, thanks for letting me be in your life. To my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.